In the sleek conference room of Pinnacle Tech Solutions, a brilliant Native American systems architect was about to face the most brutal professional assault of her career. What started as a routine quarterly review took a shocking turn when she came face to face with 2 hours of systematic humiliation. Maya Rivers wasn't your typical corporate employee. For 29 years, she had spent her life mastering the balance between traditional Cherokee wisdom and cutting-edge technology, known for her unshakable composure and strategic mind. When she encountered Marcus Thornfield's calculated cruelty, designed to destroy her reputation, she had no idea she was walking into a trap that would become his downfall. Maya's gracious, "Thank you for the feedback, Marcus," that would lead to a methodical campaign exposing years of corruption and discrimination. What began as workplace harassment would become corporate justice. The Denver tech industry would never be the same after a patient hunter proved that quiet strength could defeat the loudest bully. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Denver skyline stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Conference Room A, its glass towers catching the afternoon sun like scattered diamonds. Maya Rivers sat perfectly still at the polished mahogany table, her hands folded, calmly in her lap as Marcus Thornfield's voice filled the space with calculated venom. "I have to question," Marcus said, his tone carrying the practiced condescension of a man who believed his Harvard MBA made him superior to everyone in the room. We'll see whether these performance metrics truly reflect the quality of work we expect from our senior architects. Maya's quarterly report lay open on the table before her. 43 pages of meticulous documentation showing her team's systems had achieved 99.7% uptime, reduced security vulnerabilities by 60%, and saved the company nearly $2 million in operational costs. The numbers spoke for themselves. Yet Marcus continued his assault as if the evidence before him was meaningless. "Ms. Rivers," he continued, deliberately emphasizing the formal address while everyone else in the room went by their first names, "I'm particularly concerned about your approach to the authentication protocols. These unconventional methods you've implemented. Are they based on industry standards, or are we experimenting with untested theories?" The question hung in the air like poisoned smoke. Maya felt the subtle shift in the room's energy, the way Elena Martinez's pen stopped moving across her notepad, how David Chen's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly, the manner in which Sarah Kim's eyes darted between Maya and Marcus with growing discomfort. "The protocols follow NIST cybersecurity framework guidelines," Maya replied evenly, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who knew her craft intimately. "They've been thoroughly tested and peer-reviewed. The implementation reduced our authentication-related breaches to 0 over the past quarter." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth that never reached his eyes. 0 breaches. Impressive claim. But I wonder if we're perhaps over-engineering solutions? Sometimes the most elegant approach is the simplest one. Not everyone needs to reinvent the wheel to prove their worth. The words carried layers of meaning that everyone in the room understood. Maya's grandmother had taught her to read the key currents beneath still water to see the true shape of things that others chose to hide. Marcus wasn't questioning her technical decisions. He was questioning her right to make them. "Sir," David Chen spoke up from the far end of the table, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Maya's authentication system prevented the same type of breach that cost TechFlow Industries $3 million last month. The comparison data is in the appendix." "Thank you, David." Marcus cut him off with the dismissive tone reserved for junior employees who overstepped their bounds. "But I think Ms. Rivers is quite capable of defending her own work, assuming, of course, that it is her work." The implication hit the room like a physical blow. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jennifer Walsh, Marcus's assistant, stared down at her tablet with obvious distress. Only Maya remained motionless, her dark eyes fixed on Marcus with the steady patience her grandmother had called the stillness before the storm. For 2 hours, Marcus continued his systematic destruction. He questioned her budget allocations, suggesting that someone with her background might not understand the complexities of corporate finance. He dismissed her innovative load-balancing algorithm as unnecessarily complex, implying that perhaps she was compensating for fundamental gaps in understanding. Each attack was carefully crafted to maintain plausible deniability while delivering maximum psychological damage. "I'm also concerned," Marcus said, consulting his notes with theatrical precision, "about the cultural fit issues we've been experiencing. Our clients expect a certain level of professional presentation, traditional approaches, proven methodologies, not experimental techniques that might reflect personal perspectives rather than sound business practices." Elena Martinez's jaw tightened. She'd seen this performance before, watched Marcus systematically destroy talented employees who threatened his carefully constructed image of indispensability. But Maya Rivers was different. While others had fought back or crumbled under the assault, Maya simply observed, occasionally making brief notes in her leather portfolio. Maya's mind drifted momentarily to her grandmother's voice, echoing across decades. "The hawk that screams loudest often hunts poorly, granddaughter. Watch the silent hunter. She studies her prey until she knows every weakness, every pattern. Only then does she strike." Furthermore, Marcus continued, now openly enjoying himself as the room's discomfort fed his sense of power, "I question whether some of our recent hires truly understand the demands of a corporate environment. Academic credentials from prestigious institutions don't always translate to practical business sense. Sometimes we mistake diversity initiatives for merit-based selection." The words fell like stones into still water, each one creating ripples of tension that touched everyone present. David Chen's phone was positioned carefully on the table, its recording light hidden beneath a stack of papers. He'd made the decision to document this travesty without conscious thought, his moral compass overriding concerns about job security. Maya absorbed each verbal blow with the same steady composure she'd maintained for the entire meeting. Her grandmother had faced far worse: boarding schools designed to destroy her culture, supervisors who denied her basic humanity, systems built to ensure her failure. Yet Grace Rivers had survived, thrived, and passed on the wisdom of patient strength to her granddaughter. "I want to see a complete overhaul of these systems," Marcus concluded, his voice carrying the satisfied tone of a man who believed he'd successfully asserted his dominance. "Traditional approaches, industry standards, proven methodologies. No, more experimental gambles that put our client relationships at risk. I expect a proposal on my desk by Friday, outlining how we'll transition back to reliable, conventional solutions." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to shatter glass. Maya could sense the room waiting for her response. Some expected anger, others anticipated tears or defensive protests. Marcus himself leaned back with the smug satisfaction of a predator that had successfully cornered its prey. Instead, Maya closed her portfolio with deliberate care and rose from her chair, with fluid grace. Her movements carried the dignity of generations who had faced far greater challenges than a petty corporate tyrant drunk on temporary power. "Thank you for the feedback, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying genuine warmth that somehow made the words more devastating than any angry response could have been. "I appreciate your perspective." The pause before perspective lasted only a heartbeat, but it contained multitudes. In that brief silence, everyone in the room heard exactly what Maya thought of Marcus's perspective, his methods, and his character. Yet her tone remained so professionally courteous that he couldn't object without revealing his own awareness of the meeting's true nature. Maya gathered her materials with unhurried precision, nodded politely to the room, and walked toward the door. Her steps were measured, controlled, carrying no hint of the storm building behind her calm exterior. The room remained frozen in stunned silence long after the door closed behind her. Marcus had expected victory, but the taste in his mouth felt oddly bitter. David Chen stared at his phone, still processing what he'd witnessed and recorded. Elena Martinez was already calculating the legal implications of what had just occurred. None of them realized that Maya Rivers was 3 steps ahead, her mind already mapping the careful, methodical campaign that would expose every weakness Marcus had revealed about himself. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory, "The patient hunter knows that today's prey often becomes tomorrow's predator, but only if she has the wisdom to wait for the perfect moment to strike." The elevator doors closed behind Maya with a soft chime, and she allowed herself one small smile. Marcus Thornfield had no idea what he'd just unleashed. The elevator descended in silence, its soft hum the only sound accompanying Maya's controlled breathing. Her reflection in the polished steel doors showed nothing of the calculations already spinning through her mind. 23 floors to process. What had just occurred? 23 floors to begin transforming humiliation into strategy. Maya's office sat at the corner of the building's 12th floor, its windows offering a view of the mountains that reminded her of home. She settled behind her desk and opened her laptop, but her fingers remained still on the keyboard. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "When the storm passes, the wise woman counts both her losses and her tools." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. David Chen stood in her doorway, his face flushed with barely contained anger, his phone clutched in his trembling hand. "Maya, what just happened up there was—" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I recorded it, the whole thing. I know I should have asked permission, but I couldn't just sit there and—" "David." Maya's voice carried gentle authority. "Thank you, but put the phone away for now." He blinked, clearly expecting a different response. "Don't you want to?" "Hear it? The things he said, the way he—" "I heard every word." Maya's tone remained steady, revealing nothing of her intentions. But rushing into action without strategy often causes more harm than help. David's shoulders sagged slightly. He'd been prepared to charge into battle, to demand immediate justice. Maya's composure left him uncertain, adrift in the space between outrage and helplessness. After David left, Maya stared out at the mountains until her desk phone buzzed. Elena Martinez's voice came through the speaker with professional neutrality. "Maya, do you have a few minutes? I'd like to discuss some workplace culture initiatives." The HR office felt smaller than usual, its motivational posters and employee handbook displays creating an ironic backdrop for what Maya sensed would be a crucial conversation. Elena closed the door and drew the blinds before turning to face her. "What happened in that meeting was unacceptable," Elena said without preamble. "I've been documenting Marcus's behavior for months, but today—" She shook her head. "Today crossed every line we have." Maya studied Elena's face, reading the genuine frustration behind her professional mask. "What kind of documentation?" "Comments in performance reviews that have nothing to do with work quality, budget allocation patterns that consistently favor certain demographics, meeting notes where he questions people's credentials based on factors that should be irrelevant." Elena's voice grew harder. "And the complaints that somehow never make it into his file." "Complaints from other employees?" 3 in the past year, all from women or minorities, all somehow resolved through alternative channels that left no paper trail. Elena leaned forward. "Maya, I need you to know that some of us see what's happening. Some of us care about doing the right thing." Maya nodded slowly. "And what would the right thing look like? Proper documentation, following procedures, building a case that can't be dismissed or buried." Elena's eyes met Maya's. "But it would require patience, time to do things correctly." Meanwhile, 3 floors above, Marcus Thornfield lounged in his executive chair, regaling 2 colleagues with his version of the afternoon's events. His voice carried the satisfied tone of a man who believed he'd successfully put an upstart in her place. "Sometimes you have to remind people about standards," he said, swirling his scotch. "About what this company represents. We can't let feelings override business sense." Jennifer Walsh sat at her desk outside Marcus's office, her stomach churning as she listened to his casual cruelty. She'd worked for him for 3 years, watching talented people disappear after similar meetings. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Her computer screen showed Marcus's calendar for the coming week. Performance documentation review, M. Rivers, was scheduled for Thursday morning. Below that, a lunch meeting with HR labeled Personnel Discussions. Jennifer's hands shook slightly as she realized what was being planned. That evening, Maya sat in her apartment, her phone pressed to her ear as her grandmother's familiar voice provided the anchor she needed. "Tell me about this man," Grace said after Maya had related the day's events. "He's insecure, threatened, by competence he can't claim credit for. He uses his position to tear down others instead of building anything himself." "Ah." Grace's voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "The weak leader who rules through fear. I have seen many such men. They always carry the seeds of their own destruction. How do I fight him, grandmother?" "Child, you do not fight the storm by screaming at the wind. You study its patterns. You prepare your defenses. You wait for the moment when its own force can be turned against it." Grace's voice grew gentler. "What does this man value most?" Maya considered. "His reputation. His position. The illusion of his own competence. Then those are his weaknesses. A man who builds his strength on illusions has no foundation when truth comes to light." After ending the call, Maya opened her laptop and began researching. Marcus Thornfield's professional history, his previous positions, his connections within the company, every public record, every mention in trade publications, every trace of his professional footprint. The picture that emerged was telling. Pattern of lateral moves rather than promotions. Positions at companies that later faced significant challenges. Glowing recommendations that seemed oddly generic upon closer examination. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Still have the recording if you need it." Maya smiled slightly as she typed back, "Hold on to it. But remember, timing is everything." She closed the laptop and walked to her window, gazing out at the city lights scattered below like stars. Somewhere in those lights, Marcus Thornfield probably slept peacefully, confident in his victory. He had no idea that his greatest miscalculation wasn't underestimating Maya's technical skills or professional competence. He'd underestimated her patience. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of early autumn, Denver's skyline sharp against the Rocky Mountain backdrop. Maya arrived at the office 30 minutes before her usual time, using the quiet hours to begin her methodical investigation. Her grandmother had taught her that every hunter must first understand the terrain. The company's internal systems held layers of information for those who knew where to look. Budget reports, vendor contracts, project approvals, all the digital paperwork that revealed the true workings of corporate power. Maya's access as senior systems architect gave her legitimate reasons to review security logs and system performance data, but her trained eye caught patterns that others might miss. Marcus's departmental budgets showed interesting anomalies. Vendor contracts approved with minimal technical review. Security protocols implemented despite expert recommendations against them. Each decision, viewed individually, might seem merely questionable. Together, they painted a picture of dangerous incompetence masked by administrative authority. David Chen appeared at her office door with 2 cups of coffee and the nervous energy of someone desperate to help. "I've been thinking about what you said, about strategy." He set 1 cup on her desk. "I might have found something." Maya gestured for him to close the door. David pulled out his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard with the confidence of a digital native. "Remember the Meridian client security breach last month? The one that cost us the contract renewal?" David's screen filled with system logs, timestamps, and authorization codes. Marcus approved the implementation of those vulnerable authentication protocols against your explicit recommendations. The data was damning. Email chains showing Maya's detailed warnings, technical documentation proving the security flaws, and Marcus's dismissive responses overriding her expertise. The subsequent breach had cost Pinnacle Tech Solutions not just a major client, but credibility in the marketplace. "There's more," David continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The Patterson Industries project. The budget overruns weren't due to scope creep like Marcus reported. He approved vendor payments without proper verification. Some of these companies..." David highlighted several entries. "They barely exist. Shell corporations with no real track record." Maya studied the screen, her mind cataloging each piece of evidence. "Have you shared this with anyone?" "No, I learned from watching you." David's expression grew serious. Patience first, strategy second, action last. That afternoon, Elena Martinez appeared in Maya's office with a thick folder and a grim expression. "I've been pulling some historical data," she said, settling into the chair across from Maya's desk. "The pattern goes back further than I initially realized." The folder contained copies of performance reviews, exit interviews, and HR complaints spanning the past 3 years. Names Maya recognized, talented employees who had left suddenly, their departures explained as pursuing other opportunities or seeking new challenges. Rachel Morrison, the security analyst who left last spring? Elena flipped through the documents. She filed a complaint about Marcus questioning her qualifications in front of clients. 3 weeks later, she was gone. James Whitehorse, the project manager from the Cherokee Nation who transferred to our Austin office? Another page turned. Multiple complaints about culturally insensitive comments, all somehow resolved through informal mediation. Onan! Maya absorbed each case study, seeing her own experience reflected in the pattern of systematic harassment and professional sabotage. But she also saw something else, the careful documentation Elena had been building, piece by piece, case by case. "Why haven't you acted on this before?" Maya asked. Elena's laugh carried bitter frustration. "Politics. Marcus has allies in senior management. Sterling's been traveling constantly, focused on the IPO preparations. HR complaints disappear into committees and informal resolutions." She leaned forward. "But what happened to you last Friday was different. Public, witnessed, impossible to explain away." Sarah Kim's contribution came through casual conversation by the coffee machine, her insider knowledge of executive communications proving invaluable. "Robert Sterling's been asking questions," she murmured, stirring her latte with studied nonchalance. "Client satisfaction scores, department efficiency ratings, employee retention numbers." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Routine review? Maybe. Or maybe someone's been whispering in his ear about inconsistencies between reported performance and actual results." Sarah's smile was enigmatic. "Funny how client feedback forms have been highlighting your work specifically, even on projects Marcus claimed credit for." The most unexpected intelligence came from Jennifer Walsh, Marcus's own assistant. Maya encountered her in the parking garage Thursday evening, tears streaming down Jennifer's face beside her car. "I can't do this anymore," Jennifer whispered, when Maya approached. "He wants me to fabricate performance issues, to create documentation that doesn't exist, to..." She stopped, her voice breaking. Maya handed Jennifer tissues from her purse, her voice gentle but probing. "What kind of documentation?" "Meeting notes from conversations that never happened, performance complaints from clients who actually praised your work, email records that..." Jennifer's hands shook. "I know what happens to people who cross him, but I also know what I'm becoming if I keep helping him." That evening, Maya spread her findings across her dining table like a general planning a campaign. Financial irregularities, technical incompetence, pattern of discrimination, client dissatisfaction. Each thread part of a larger web of professional misconduct. Her phone rang, breaking her concentration. "How goes the hunt, granddaughter?" Grace's voice carried warmth across the miles. "I'm learning the prey's habits. His weaknesses are becoming clear." "And what have you learned?" Maya considered her answer carefully. "He's not just a bully, grandmother. He's corrupt. Stealing credit, misallocating resources, driving away talent. He's not just hurting individuals, he's damaging the entire organization." "Ah," Grace's approval was evident. "Then your fight becomes larger than personal justice. You fight for the health of the whole community. But the evidence needs to be presented properly, through correct channels, with unshakable documentation. The patient hunter always chooses her moment. But remember, granddaughter, when that moment comes, the strike must be swift and certain. Wounded predators become desperate. Desperate creatures are dangerous." After ending the call, Maya returned to her documents. Tomorrow she would contact her cousin Ryan, ensuring the legal framework was properly established. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Marcus Thornfield had spent years building his house of cards, confident that authority and bluster could mask incompetence and cruelty. He'd never imagined that his greatest victim would possess both the patience to gather evidence and the intelligence to use it effectively. The hunter was closing in, and the prey had no idea the trap was already set. The drive to Oklahoma stretched endlessly before Maya, I-70 giving way to smaller highways as Denver's skyline faded into memory. She'd requested Friday off under the guise of a family emergency, technically true, though the emergency was more philosophical than medical. The weight of the past week pressed against her shoulders like a physical burden, demanding the kind of wisdom that only Grace Rivers could provide. The tribal lands of eastern Oklahoma welcomed her with familiar embrace. Rolling hills dotted with oak trees, pastures where horses grazed in peaceful abundance, and the sense of belonging that no corporate office could ever replicate. Maya's grandmother lived in a modest house on land that had been in their family for 3 generations, its wraparound porch facing east to greet each dawn. Grace Rivers stood waiting as Maya's car pulled into the gravel driveway, her silver hair braided down her back, her dark eyes bright with intelligence that age had only sharpened. At 78, she moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had learned to conserve energy for what truly mattered. "Granddaughter," Grace said simply, folding Maya into arms that smelled of sage and cedar. "I felt your spirit calling from many miles away." They settled on the porch as afternoon shadows lengthened, sweet tea sweating in glasses between them. Maya had intended to launch immediately into her workplace crisis, but Grace's presence demanded a different rhythm. Here, time moved according to older patterns, the pace of seasons rather than quarterly reports. "Tell me about this man who troubles you," Grace said when Maya had finished recounting the humiliation and her subsequent discoveries. "He's everything I was taught to distrust," Maya replied. "Arrogant, cruel, careless with other people's lives and work. But he's also clever enough to hide his worst behaviors behind corporate language." Grace nodded thoughtfully. "Your great-great-grandmother faced such a man, an Indian agent who controlled rations and supplies during the hungry years. He would humiliate our people publicly, demand degrading performances for basic necessities, made them beg for what was rightfully theirs. What happened to him? He grew overconfident, began stealing from the government as well as from us. My grandmother gathered evidence, quietly, patiently. When the federal investigators came, she had documentation of every theft, every abuse, every law he had broken." Grace's smile carried sharp satisfaction. "He died in federal prison." Maya leaned forward. How did she know to wait? How did she resist striking back immediately? She understood the difference between revenge and justice, Grace said, her voice taking on the cadence reserved for teaching. Revenge is hot emotion, quick satisfaction that often burns the seeker as much as the target. Justice is patient work that heals communities. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun continued its descent. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals with effortless grace, and Grace pointed toward it. Watch how she hunts. See how she circles, studies, waits for the perfect moment when her prey is most vulnerable. The hawk suddenly dove, emerging from tall grass with a field mouse in its talons. One strike, clean and final. No waste, no unnecessary cruelty. That evening, Maya's extended family gathered for what ostensibly was a routine dinner, but felt more like ceremony. Cousins, aunts, and uncles filled Grace's modest living room, their conversations weaving between English and Cherokee as children played underfoot. Maya found herself explaining her career to relatives who worked construction, taught in tribal schools, or ran small businesses that served their community. "You fight for justice in a different arena," her Uncle Robert said after hearing about her situation. "But the principles remain the same. Protect the community, preserve dignity, use intelligence over force." Later that night, as Maya helped wash dishes, Grace spoke quietly about the boarding school years. "They tried to teach us that our ways were primitive, that white education was superior. But they never understood that wisdom and intelligence are different things. Intelligence can be taught from books. Wisdom comes from understanding the true nature of things." "What's the true nature of my situation?" Maya asked. Grace dried a plate with slow, deliberate motions. "Your man, this Marcus, he is weak. Weakness makes people dangerous, but it also makes them predictable. He will continue his patterns, because he knows no other way. Each action will give you more ammunition. So I wait for him to destroy himself? You create conditions where his destruction becomes inevitable." Grace set the plate in the cupboard with gentle finality. "But you do it in a way that strengthens rather than weakens your community. That builds rather than destroys." Saturday morning found Maya and Grace walking the property boundaries, following paths worn by generations of family. Grace carried a small leather pouch, stopping occasionally to gather specific plants: sage for cleansing, cedar for protection, sweetgrass for calling positive spirits. In the old days, before a difficult hunt or battle, our people would seek guidance through ceremony, Grace explained, bundling the plants with practiced hands. Not for magic, but for clarity. To understand their own motivations and ensure their actions served the greater good. They built a small fire behind the house as the sun climbed higher. Grace burned the gathered plants, the smoke carrying their prayers skyward. Maya found herself speaking aloud her fears, her anger, her uncertainty about the path forward. "I want him to pay for what he's done," she admitted. "Not just to me, but to everyone he's hurt. But I also want to do it right, to build something better, rather than just tearing down something broken." Grace nodded approvingly. "Then you understand the difference between a warrior and a bully. Warriors fight to protect, bullies fight to dominate." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small silver pendant, a traditional Cherokee design that had belonged to Maya's great-grandmother. "Wear this to remember who you are and what you represent." Sunday afternoon arrived too quickly, time to return to Denver and the battle that awaited. Maya loaded her car with containers of Grace's food and a renewed sense of purpose. Her grandmother stood on the porch, hand raised in farewell. "Remember," Grace called as Maya started the engine, "the storm that seems most destructive often clears the air for new growth. Trust your intelligence, but more importantly, trust your wisdom." The drive back to Denver passed in contemplative silence, Maya's mind processing everything she'd learned. The evidence against Marcus was substantial, but Grace's teachings had given her something more valuable: a framework for using that evidence responsibly. She understood now that her fight wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about creating a workplace where talented people could thrive regardless of their background, about ensuring that intelligence and competence mattered more than politics and prejudice. Marcus Thornfield had made the mistake of attacking not just an individual, but the representative of a people who had survived centuries of systematic attempts at destruction. He'd awakened something in Maya that combined traditional wisdom with modern capability, a combination he was completely unprepared to face. The hunter was ready to strike, but now she would do so with the precision and purpose her ancestors would have recognized and approved. Monday morning arrived with November's crisp bite, Denver's skyline sharp against snow-dusted peaks. Maya entered Pinnacle Tech Solutions with the focused intensity of a general implementing a carefully planned campaign. Her grandmother's pendant rested against her collarbone beneath her professional blouse, its weight a constant reminder of purpose beyond personal vindication. Elena Martinez arrived early for their scheduled meeting, clutching a steaming coffee and a thick folder that would form the backbone of their formal case. Maya's office door closed with quiet finality as they spread documents across the conference table. "I've structured everything according to corporate policy and legal requirements," Elena said, her professional mask firmly in place despite the magnitude of what they were undertaking. "Incident reports, pattern documentation, witness statements, where possible. Each piece independently verifiable. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Maya reviewed the meticulously organized files. Elena had transformed scattered evidence into an unassailable legal framework. "This is more comprehensive than I expected." 3 years of careful documentation, Elena replied grimly. "I knew this day would come eventually. Marcus's behavior was too consistent, too flagrant to remain hidden forever. The question was whether we'd have someone with the courage and competence to see it through." They scheduled the formal complaint filing for Wednesday afternoon, allowing time for Maya to contact additional support systems. Elena's eyes met Maya's with shared understanding. Once they filed these documents, there would be no turning back. David Chen appeared in Maya's office that afternoon with the nervous energy of someone carrying dangerous secrets. His laptop bag bulged with printouts and storage devices, evidence of late-night digital archaeology. "I've been following the money trails," he said, spreading technical documents across Maya's desk. "The vendor irregularities go deeper than we first thought. Some of these shell companies Marcus approved for contracts?" David highlighted several entries. "They're registered to addresses that don't exist, tax ID numbers that don't match any legitimate business entities." Maya studied the financial forensics. "How much money are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate, $800,000 over 18 months. Payments for services that were never rendered, equipment that was never delivered, consultancy fees for expertise that never materialized." David's voice carried the controlled anger of someone who understood the implications. "This isn't just incompetence, it's embezzlement." Sarah Kim's contribution came through her access to executive communications and client relationships. She appeared at Maya's office door with the casual confidence of someone discussing routine business matters. "Robert Sterling's been asking pointed questions about departmental efficiency ratings," Sarah said, settling into the chair across from Maya's desk. "Specifically about discrepancies between reported performance and actual client satisfaction scores." "What kind of discrepancies?" "Marcus has been claiming credit for innovations and improvements that originated from your team, but client feedback consistently mentions you by name, even on projects where Marcus submitted the final reports." Sarah's smile carried sharp satisfaction. "It's becoming obvious to anyone paying attention that there's a disconnect between who's doing the work and who's getting the recognition." Maya felt the pieces of her strategy clicking into place with mechanical precision: financial misconduct, performance fraud, discrimination patterns, each element building toward an irrefutable case for Marcus's removal. That evening, Maya called her cousin Ryan Torres, reaching him at his law office where he was working late on another employment discrimination case. Ryan's voice carried the focused intensity of someone who understood the complexities of workplace justice. "Based on what you've described, you have grounds for both internal corporate action and external legal proceedings," Ryan said after Maya had outlined the evidence. "The key is maintaining parallel tracks. Let the company handle the internal investigation while we prepare for potential retaliation or inadequate response. What's the timeline? File your internal complaint first. Give them reasonable time to investigate and respond appropriately. Document everything, every conversation, every meeting, every decision. If they fail to act decisively, we escalate to EOC filing and potential civil litigation." Maya appreciated Ryan's methodical approach. Her grandmother's teachings about patience aligned perfectly with legal strategy. Both required careful preparation and perfect timing. Jennifer Walsh's unexpected assistance came through a chance encounter in the parking garage Thursday evening. Maya found Marcus's assistant sitting in her car, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. "He wants me to create false documentation," Jennifer whispered when Maya approached. "Performance complaints from clients who actually praised your work. Meeting notes from conversations that never happened. Financial records that—" She stopped, her voice breaking. Maya handed Jennifer tissues from her purse, her training in crisis management taking over. "What kind of financial records?" "Vendor authorizations with forged signatures, budget, allocations that were never approved through proper channels. Email chains that have been altered to change dates and approvals." Jennifer's moral conflict was evident in every trembling word. "I know what happens to people who cross him, but I also know what I'm becoming if I keep helping him." Maya's pulse quickened as she realized the magnitude of what Jennifer was revealing. "Do you have copies of these documents?" Jennifer nodded, reaching into her purse to withdraw a USB drive. "Everything. 3 years of financial irregularities, falsified reports, altered communications. I've been keeping backups because—" She shrugged helplessly. "Because somewhere deep down, I knew this day would come." Friday afternoon brought the final piece of Maya's strategic puzzle. David discovered evidence of a major security breach that had resulted directly from Marcus's approval of vulnerable protocols despite expert warnings. The breach had cost the company not just client confidence, but significant financial liability. "The forensic audit clearly shows that your recommended security measures would have prevented the infiltration," David explained, pointing to technical documentation that painted a damning picture of administrative negligence. "Marcus overrode your expertise for no legitimate technical reason. The only explanation is that he prioritized personal authority over professional competence." Maya leaned back in her chair, surveying the comprehensive case they had built together. Financial fraud, security negligence, discrimination patterns, performance theft, document falsification, each charge supported by irrefutable evidence and credible witnesses. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Sterling's back from his Asia trip, ready to present when you are." Maya smiled, feeling her grandmother's wisdom guiding her fingers as she typed her response. "Monday morning, it's time." That weekend, Maya reviewed every piece of evidence one final time, ensuring nothing had been overlooked or left to chance. Her grandmother had taught her that the patient hunter studies her prey until she understands not just its patterns, but its vulnerabilities. Marcus Thornfield's greatest vulnerability was his absolute confidence that his position made him untouchable. Monday would prove how wrong he was. Monday morning arrived with the brittle clarity of late November, frost etching delicate patterns across Maya's apartment windows. She dressed with deliberate care, choosing her grandmother's pendant and a navy suit that projected quiet authority. Today would test everything her family had taught her about maintaining composure under pressure. Marcus Thornfield sensed the shift in office dynamics like a predator detecting danger in the wind. 3 decades of corporate maneuvering had honed. His instincts for identifying threats and something in the weekend's silence felt ominous. Jennifer Walsh's nervous energy when she handed him his Monday morning coffee only confirmed his suspicions. "Cancel my 10 a.m. with Patterson Industries," he instructed, his voice carrying the sharp edge that preceded his most ruthless campaigns. "And schedule a meeting with HR about performance documentation protocols." Maya arrived to find an email marked urgent waiting in her inbox. Marcus had scheduled a performance improvement discussion for Wednesday morning, copying Elena Martinez and Robert Sterling on the meeting invitation. The message's formal language barely concealed its true purpose, a preemptive strike designed to undermine her credibility before she could act. "He's moving faster than expected," Elena observed when Maya forwarded the email. "This is classic retaliation behavior. Document everything." David Chen discovered the first concrete evidence of Marcus's desperation during his routine system: maintenance. "He's been accessing your files after hours," David reported, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Project documents, performance reviews, client communications, all outside normal business parameters." Maya felt her grandmother's teachings about predator behavior proving accurate. Threatened animals became unpredictable, abandoning caution for desperate aggression. Marcus was revealing more about his character with each panicked response. Tuesday brought escalating harassment disguised as administrative oversight. Marcus appeared at Maya's office door with manufactured concerns about project timelines, budget allocations, and client communications. Each interaction felt calculated to create documentation of supposed performance issues. "I'm concerned about your accessibility, Maya," he said during his third unscheduled visit, Jennifer Walsh trailing behind with her tablet to record the conversation. "Clients have been mentioning difficulties reaching you for urgent consultations." Maya consulted her calendar with deliberate calm. "Which clients specifically? I can review my response times to identify any gaps in service." Marcus's confident smile flickered slightly. He'd expected defensive protests, not professional competence that invited scrutiny. "Well, it's more about perception than specific incidents. But perception matters in our business." Sarah Kim witnessed Marcus's increasingly erratic behavior during the Tuesday afternoon executive briefing. He spent 20 minutes complaining about communication breakdowns and accountability issues, she reported to Maya afterward. But when Sterling asked for specific examples, Marcus could only offer vague concerns about cultural fit and team dynamics. Maya absorbed each piece of intelligence with growing satisfaction. Marcus's counterattack was revealing exactly the pattern of harassment and retaliation that would strengthen her formal complaint. Wednesday morning's performance improvement discussion proved to be Marcus's greatest tactical error. He arrived armed with a folder of manufactured concerns and Jennifer's reluctantly prepared documentation, confident that administrative authority would overwhelm professional competence. "Maya, I've been reviewing your recent work patterns and I have serious concerns," he began, spreading papers across the conference table with theatrical precision. "Client feedback has been troubling. Questions about responsiveness, technical accuracy, professional presentation." Maya opened her own folder, a mirror image of Marcus's documentation, but supported by actual evidence rather than manufactured complaints. "I'd be happy to review specific client feedback. I have detailed records of all interactions, response times, and satisfaction metrics." Elena Martinez watched the exchange with professional fascination. Marcus had walked directly into a trap of his own making, creating documentation of retaliatory behavior, while Maya maintained perfect composure and factual accuracy. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, his voice rising slightly as Maya's calm responses frustrated his planned narrative. There have been concerns about your collaboration with team members. Some colleagues feel that your approach to problem-solving creates unnecessary tension. Which colleagues? Maya asked simply. I'd appreciate the opportunity to address any specific concerns through appropriate channels. Marcus's folder contained impressive fabrications, but Maya's contained Jennifer's USB drive with evidence of the document creation process. Every forged signature, every altered email, every falsified client complaint was documented with timestamps and metadata that would horrify any competent investigation. I think we need to consider whether this position remains the right fit, Marcus concluded, clearly frustrated by Maya's refusal to react emotionally. Perhaps a transition to a different role, with less client interaction and more structured oversight. Maya closed her folder with deliberate precision. I appreciate your feedback, Marcus. I believe a comprehensive review would benefit everyone involved. The meeting ended with Marcus confident he'd established grounds for Maya's removal and Maya certain he'd provided the final evidence needed for his destruction. Elena's notes captured every retaliatory statement, every manufactured concern, every admission of predetermined bias. Thursday brought Marcus's most desperate gambit. He attempted to remove Maya from the Synthex Industries project, Pinnacle's largest client contract, and Maya's most visible success. The move required overriding multiple department heads and contradicting explicit client requests for Maya's continued involvement. This is beyond retaliation, Elena told Maya during their afternoon strategy session. This is professional sabotage that directly damages company interests. Sterling won't tolerate threats to major client relationships. Jennifer Walsh reached her breaking point that evening, appearing at Maya's office after most employees had left for the day. Her hands shook as she placed a second USB drive on Maya's desk. He's planning to frame you for the Meridian security breach, Jennifer whispered. Altered reports showing that you approved the vulnerable protocols. Forged emails with your digital signature. He spent the weekend creating an entire false narrative. Maya felt the final pieces of her strategic puzzle clicking into place. Marcus's desperation had driven him to commit federal crimes, document forgery, fraud, obstruction of justice. Her grandmother's wisdom about patient hunting proved prophetic. The prey had become so panicked that it was destroying itself. Friday afternoon brought news that Robert Sterling had scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday morning to discuss urgent departmental concerns. Marcus received the invitation with smug satisfaction, believing he'd successfully orchestrated Maya's downfall. He had no idea that Maya would be presenting evidence of crimes that would end his career and potentially result in criminal prosecution. The patient hunter had allowed her prey to exhaust itself with increasingly desperate attacks. Now it was time to strike. Friday evening's snow fell in heavy, silent flakes outside Jennifer Walsh's apartment windows as she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the USB drives that contained 3 years of Marcus Thornfield's crimes. Her moral universe had shifted completely over the past week, forcing her to confront the reality of her complicity in systematic abuse. Her phone buzzed, with yet another message from Marcus. Need those revised reports first thing Monday. Make sure the documentation clearly establishes the timeline we discussed. Jennifer's hands trembled as she typed her response. I'll have everything ready. The lie felt necessary now, buying time while justice prepared its final approach. Saturday morning brought Maya to Elena Martinez's home office, where they spent hours organizing the mountain of evidence into prosecutorial precision. Elena's dining room table disappeared beneath folders of documentation, each piece corroborating the others in an unbreakable chain of proof. Jennifer's evidence changes everything, Elena said, reviewing the falsified documents with growing amazement. This isn't just workplace harassment anymore. This is conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, federal crimes that could result in prison time. Maya studied the altered reports that would have destroyed her career and reputation. He was willing to commit felonies to avoid accountability. Desperation makes people reckless, Elena replied, unconsciously echoing Grace Rivers' wisdom. But recklessness leaves evidence. David Chen spent his weekend performing digital forensics that would have impressed federal investigators. His analysis of system logs, metadata, and file creation timestamps built an irrefutable timeline of Marcus's document manipulation. The beauty of digital evidence, David explained to Maya over coffee Sunday morning, is that it's almost impossible to completely erase. Every alteration leaves traces. Every forgery contains digital fingerprints. Marcus thought his administrative access made him invisible, but he actually created a perfect audit trail of his crimes. Sunday afternoon brought the call Maya had been expecting. Robert Sterling's voice carried the controlled tension of a CEO who had begun to understand the magnitude of the crisis brewing within his company. "Maya, I need to see you in my office first thing Monday morning. Elena will be there, along with our head of legal. We have some serious matters to discuss." "Of course, Mr. Sterling. I'll be there at 8. And Maya, bring whatever documentation you think might be relevant to recent departmental concerns." The call's subtext was clear. Sterling had heard enough whispers to demand answers. Sarah Kim's strategic information sharing had reached its target, creating exactly the opening Maya needed. That evening, Maya called her grandmother for final guidance before the confrontation that would determine everything. "I can feel your readiness, granddaughter," Grace said without preamble. "The time for patience has passed. Now comes the time for truth. I'm nervous about presenting everything properly. There's so much evidence, so many different crimes and patterns." "Remember the lesson of the hawk," Grace advised. "She doesn't attack with anger or hatred. She strikes with precision and purpose, taking only what is necessary to survive and protect her territory. Present your truth the same way, cleanly, completely, without unnecessary cruelty." Monday morning arrived with crystal clarity, Denver's skyline sharp against the snow-covered Rockies. Maya dressed in her most professional attire, her grandmother's pendant hidden beneath a crisp white blouse, and arrived at Sterling's office, 15 minutes early. Robert Sterling's corner office reflected the success of a man who had built Pinnacle Tech Solutions from startup to industry leader. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered commanding views of the city, while walls lined with awards and client recognitions testified to genuine achievement built on merit rather than politics. Elena Martinez sat at the conference table with legal counsel Rebecca Torres, no relation to Maya's cousin Ryan, but equally competent in employment law. The gravity of their expressions suggested that weekend conversations had prepared them for serious revelations. "Maya, please sit down," Sterling said, his tone carrying the controlled urgency of a crisis manager. "Elena has briefed me on some concerning allegations regarding Marcus Thornfield's conduct. I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Maya opened her presentation folder with steady hands, her grandmother's teachings about clarity and purpose guiding her words. "Mr. Sterling, what I'm about to show you represents a pattern of discrimination, harassment, financial fraud, and document falsification that spans several years." For the next hour, Maya methodically presented evidence that painted an undeniable picture of systematic corruption. Financial records showing fraudulent vendor payments. Technical documentation proving Marcus's negligent security decisions had cost the company millions. Jennifer's evidence of document forgery and obstruction of justice. Sterling's expression grew increasingly grim as the scope of Marcus's misconduct became clear. These financial irregularities alone represent serious criminal behavior. The discriminatory conduct violates every policy we have. But the document falsification. He shook his head in disbelief. That's federal crime territory. Rebecca Torres reviewed the legal implications with prosecutorial precision. We have obligation to report the financial crimes to federal authorities. The discrimination creates significant civil liability, and the retaliation documented here establishes clear grounds for immediate termination. Elena presented the timeline of Marcus's recent desperate actions: the unauthorized file access, the manufactured performance complaints, the attempt to remove Maya from major client projects. His behavior has escalated dramatically since Friday's meeting. He's acting like someone who knows he's about to be exposed. David Chen arrived with technical evidence that sealed Marcus's fate. His digital forensics proved beyond doubt that the documents Marcus planned to use against Maya were recent fabrications created on his personal computer using company resources. The metadata doesn't lie, David explained, projecting his analysis onto Sterling's conference room screen. These supposedly historical documents were created this weekend. The forged signatures, the altered emails, the falsified client complaints, all of it traceable to Marcus's home computer. Sterling stood and walked to his windows, staring out at the city while processing the magnitude of the crisis. When he turned back, his expression carried the cold determination of a leader prepared to protect his organization at any cost. "I want Marcus suspended immediately pending full investigation. Security will escort him from the building this afternoon. His access to all company systems terminates now." Sterling's voice carried absolute authority. "Rebecca, coordinate with federal authorities regarding the financial crimes. Elena, begin documentation for termination proceedings." Maya felt her grandmother's wisdom vindicated as truth finally emerged from darkness. The patient hunter had waited for the perfect moment, and that moment had arrived with devastating precision. Marcus Thornfield's reign of terror was about to end. Monday afternoon's corporate boardroom felt charged with the tension of impending judgment. Maya Rivers sat at the polished mahogany table, her presentation materials arranged with military precision before her. Across from her, Robert Sterling reviewed preliminary evidence with the focused intensity of a CEO whose company's reputation hung in the balance. Elena Martinez flanked Maya's right side, her comprehensive HR documentation creating an imposing fortress of policy violations and legal precedents. David Chen sat quietly with his laptop, ready to provide technical evidence that would destroy any defense Marcus might attempt. Rebecca Torres, head of legal, occupied the head of the table with the authority of someone prepared to handle federal criminal referrals. "Before we begin," Sterling said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years building Pinnacle Tech Solutions from startup to industry leader, "I want everyone to understand the gravity of what we're discussing. These allegations, if substantiated, represent fundamental violations of everything this company stands for." Maya opened her presentation folder, feeling her grandmother's pendant warm against her skin, a tangible reminder of the wisdom and strength that had carried her to this moment. "Mr. Sterling, what I'm presenting today represents 3 years of systematic misconduct that has damaged employees, clients, and the company's financial interests." The first section of Maya's presentation focused on financial irregularities that painted a clear picture of embezzlement and fraud. David's forensic analysis revealed shell companies receiving payments for non-existent services, vendor contracts approved without proper oversight, and budget manipulations that had cost the company nearly $1 million. "These aren't accounting errors," Maya explained, highlighting specific transactions with laser pointer precision. "These are deliberate, fraudulent activities designed to funnel company resources to entities controlled by Marcus or his associates." Sterling's jaw tightened as he reviewed the financial evidence. Each fraudulent transaction represented not just theft, but betrayal of the trust that had built his company's success. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on our analysis, at least 18 months, David replied, pulling up additional screens of data. The pattern escalates significantly after Marcus received expanded budget authority following his promotion to VP of Operations. Elena presented the discrimination evidence with prosecutorial precision, documenting a pattern of harassment that extended far beyond Maya's experience. Performance reviews that questioned employees' qualifications based on ethnicity rather than competence. Meeting notes that contained culturally insensitive comments. Exit interviews revealing systematic targeting of minority employees. The pattern is unmistakable, Elena explained, spreading documentation across the table. Marcus has consistently used his position to undermine employees who don't fit his preferred demographic profile. Maya's case is simply the most recent and most brazen example. Rebecca Torres reviewed the legal implications with grave concern. This level of documented discrimination creates significant federal liability. We're looking at potential EEOC violations, civil rights lawsuits, and serious reputational damage if this becomes public knowledge. Maya's presentation of Marcus's retaliation campaign revealed the desperation of a man who knew his crimes were being discovered. Unauthorized access to confidential files, manufactured performance complaints, and attempts to remove her from major client projects painted a picture of abuse of power that shocked even Sterling's experienced leadership team. He was willing to damage client relationships to silence opposition, Maya observed, displaying emails showing Marcus's attempts to remove her from the Synthex Industries project, despite explicit client requests for her continued involvement. The most damning evidence came from Jennifer Walsh's courage in preserving Marcus's criminal activities. The falsified documents, forged signatures, and altered communications represented felony-level obstruction of justice that crossed every legal boundary. These documents were created this weekend, David explained, projecting metadata analysis that proved the fabrication timeline. Marcus spent his weekend creating an entirely false narrative designed to frame Maya for his own incompetence and crimes. Sterling stood and walked to the windows overlooking Denver's skyline, processing the magnitude of betrayal by someone he had trusted with significant corporate responsibility. When he turned back, his expression carried the cold resolve of a leader prepared to protect his organization. The financial crimes alone justify immediate termination and criminal referral, he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. The discrimination creates legal liability that could cost us millions, but the document falsification, he shook his head in disbelief. That's a federal felony that could result in prison time. Maya felt vindication flowing through her like warm sunlight after a bitter winter. Her grandmother's teachings about patient strategy had proven absolutely correct. The predator had destroyed itself through increasingly desperate actions. Maya, Sterling continued, his tone shifting to recognition and respect. Your handling of this crisis has been exemplary. You maintained professionalism under extreme provocation while building an irrefutable case that protects the company and its employees. Elena nodded approvingly. Maya's methodical approach ensured we have documentation that will satisfy any federal investigation. Her patience prevented a reactive response that might have compromised the evidence. Rebecca Torres outlined immediate next steps with legal precision. Marcus will be suspended this afternoon pending full investigation. His computer access terminates immediately. We'll coordinate with federal authorities regarding the financial crimes while initiating termination proceedings for the discrimination and harassment. David Chen's technical expertise had proven crucial in documenting digital evidence that would satisfy forensic standards. The beauty of his desperation, David observed, is that every crime left electronic fingerprints. He thought his administrative access made him invisible, but he actually created a perfect audit trail. Sterling returned to his seat with the decisive energy of a leader ready to act. Maya, I'm promoting you to Director of Systems Architecture, effective immediately. You'll assume Marcus's technical responsibilities while we restructure the department to prevent future abuses. Maya felt her grandmother's wisdom echoing across generations. The patient hunter who studies her prey until the perfect moment arrives. Marcus Thornfield had spent years building his house of cards. never imagining that his greatest victim would possess both the intelligence to gather evidence and the wisdom to use it effectively. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Maya replied, her voice carrying quiet satisfaction. "I accept the position and the responsibility it represents." The meeting concluded with assignments that would dismantle Marcus's toxic legacy while building stronger protections for future employees. Elena would lead policy reviews, David would head security improvements, and Maya would oversee the technical reconstruction necessary to repair years of neglect and sabotage. As they gathered their materials, Sterling addressed Maya with genuine admiration. "Your grandmother would be proud. You've shown that true strength doesn't require loud confrontation. Sometimes it requires the patience to let truth emerge naturally." Maya smiled, touching her grandmother's pendant through her blouse. "She taught me that the storm that seems most destructive often clears the air for new growth." The patient hunter had struck with precision and purpose, and Marcus Thornfield's reign of terror was finally over. Tuesday morning arrived with the crisp finality of November's end, frost painting delicate patterns across Pinnacle Tech Solutions windows as word of Marcus Thornfield's suspension spread through the office like wildfire. Maya Rivers arrived to find her belongings being moved to the corner office that had been Marcus's domain, a space she would transform from a monument to toxic power into a collaborative center for genuine leadership. Elena Martinez coordinated the transition with military precision, her years of HR experience guiding the delicate process of dismantling Marcus's network while protecting the company from legal fallout. "Security escorted him out at 4:30 yesterday," she reported to Maya during their morning briefing. "He demanded to speak with Sterling, threatened lawsuits, claimed this was all a conspiracy against him. His reaction tells us everything we need to know," Maya replied, reviewing the personnel files Elena had prepared. "No acceptance of responsibility, no recognition of wrongdoing. Classic narcissistic response to accountability." The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit arrived Wednesday morning, their professional efficiency transforming Marcus's former office into a crime scene. Special Agent Patricia Ross led the investigation with the methodical thoroughness that white-collar crime demanded, her questions revealing the sophisticated understanding of corporate fraud that would make Marcus's defense impossible. "The evidence you've provided is exceptional," Agent Ross told Maya during their interview. "Most embezzlement cases rely on circumstantial financial patterns. You've documented intent, method, and cover-up with prosecutorial precision." David Chen's technical expertise proved invaluable to the federal investigation. His digital forensics had preserved metadata and audit trails that would satisfy courtroom standards, creating an electronic paper trail that chronicled every fraudulent transaction and falsified document. "The beautiful thing about digital evidence," David explained to Agent Ross, "is that criminals always think they can hide their tracks. But computers remember everything. Every login, every file modification, every attempt at deletion." By Thursday, Marcus's termination became official, the board of directors voting unanimously to dismiss him for cause with no severance package. Rebecca Torres ensured that every legal requirement was met while protecting the company from potential retaliation lawsuits. His employment contract contains morality clauses that void any financial protections when criminal behavior is involved, Rebecca explained during the afternoon legal briefing. He forfeits stock options, pension contributions, even his company, car. He leaves with nothing but potential prison time. Sterling's company-wide announcement carefully balanced transparency with legal prudence, acknowledging serious policy violations and financial irregularities without compromising the ongoing federal investigation. The message sent clear signals that Pinnacle Tech Solutions would not tolerate discrimination or corruption at any level. Maya's promotion brought immediate changes to departmental culture. Her first team meeting established new communication, protocols based on collaboration rather than intimidation, technical excellence rather than political maneuvering. I know many of you witnessed behavior that made you uncomfortable. Maya addressed her inherited staff, many of whom had suffered under Marcus's management. We're going to build something better, a department where competence matters more than politics, where diverse perspectives strengthen our solutions. Jennifer Walsh received a promotion to Senior Administrative Coordinator and transfer to Maya's department, finally escaping the toxic environment that had trapped her for 3 years. Her courage in preserving evidence had been crucial to Marcus's downfall, and Maya ensured she was rewarded rather than punished for doing the right thing. I was so afraid, Jennifer confided during their first one-on-one meeting. But watching you maintain your dignity throughout his attacks showed me what real strength looks like. The ripple effects extended beyond personnel changes. Sterling implemented company-wide training programs on workplace discrimination, financial oversight reforms to prevent future embezzlement, and anonymous reporting systems that would catch abusive behavior before it escalated to Marcus's level. Sarah Kim found herself with enhanced responsibilities in corporate communications, tasked with rebuilding client confidence that had been damaged by Marcus's incompetence. Her political instincts, previously used for survival in a toxic environment, now served the constructive purpose of organizational improvement. Clients are already noticing the difference, Sarah reported during Friday's executive briefing. The Synthex Industries team specifically requested that Maya remain on all future projects. They can sense the competence and professionalism that was missing under Marcus's leadership. Elena led a comprehensive review of HR practices that had allowed Marcus's behavior to continue unchecked for so long. Her analysis revealed systemic weaknesses in complaint processing, documentation requirements, and accountability measures that required fundamental reform. We can't just remove one bad actor, Elena explained to the board of directors. We need to strengthen the immune system that prevents this type of infection from taking hold in the first place. The financial recovery proved substantial. The FBI's asset forfeiture investigation recovered most of the embezzled funds from Marcus's personal accounts and the shell companies he had created. Additional savings came from improved vendor oversight and elimination of the fraudulent contracts that had drained company resources. David Chen's security improvements addressed the vulnerabilities that Marcus's negligence had created, implementing the protocols Maya had originally recommended. The enhanced systems prevented potential breaches that could have cost millions in client confidence and regulatory penalties. By December's end, the transformation was complete. Marcus Thornfield faced federal indictment on multiple felony charges, including embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction of justice. His legal team's attempts to negotiate plea agreements were hampered by the overwhelming evidence and his complete lack of remorse. Maya established a company diversity council that ensured future hiring and promotion decisions would be based on merit rather than bias. The council's first initiative was a scholarship program for underrepresented students pursuing technology careers, funded partly by recovered embezzlement money that Marcus would never see again. Justice isn't just about punishment, Maya explained to Sterling during their year-end review. It's about building systems that prevent future harm while creating opportunities for positive growth. Sterling's admiration for Maya's leadership had grown throughout the crisis and its aftermath. You've shown that true strength doesn't require domination or intimidation. You've built something better on the ruins of what Marcus destroyed. The company's fourth-quarter results reflected the positive changes. Employee satisfaction scores reached all-time highs, client retention improved significantly, and productivity increased as talented people no longer feared arbitrary retaliation for excellence. Maya's grandmother had been right about storms clearing the air for new growth. Marcus Thornfield's toxic legacy was being replaced by an organizational culture based on respect, competence, and genuine collaboration. The patient hunter had not only defeated her prey, but had used that victory to protect future generations from similar predators. 6 months later, Maya Rivers stood at the podium of the National Conference on Workplace Ethics in Chicago, looking out at an audience of HR professionals, corporate executives, and employment attorneys who had gathered to understand how systematic discrimination could be effectively challenged through legal channels. The spring sunlight streaming through the convention center's windows seemed to symbolize the new growth that had emerged from winter's harsh lessons. Workplace discrimination isn't just about individual victims, Maya began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had replaced Marcus Thornfield's bluster at Pinnacle Tech Solutions. It's about organizational cultures that either protect bullies or empower justice. The choice we make determines whether talent thrives or withers under systematic abuse. Her presentation drew heavily from her experience without naming specific individuals or companies, focusing instead on the strategic patience that had made victory possible. The audience leaned forward as Maya described the methodical documentation, alliance building, and legal preparation that had transformed personal humiliation into institutional change. The greatest mistake victims make is reacting emotionally to systematic abuse, Maya explained, clicking to a slide that outlined strategic response frameworks. Anger is natural, but anger without strategy often provides abusers with ammunition they can use to justify their behavior. During the question and answer session, a young Native American woman from the audience asked about maintaining cultural identity while navigating corporate environments designed by and for different demographics. My grandmother taught me that our ancestors survived centuries of systematic attempts at cultural destruction by understanding when to bend and when to stand firm, Maya replied. Corporate environments can feel hostile to our values, but they also provide platforms for demonstrating. The different perspectives strengthen rather than threaten organizational success. After the presentation, Maya called her grandmother from her hotel room, the familiar warmth of Grace Rivers' voice carrying across the miles between Chicago and Oklahoma. I listened to your presentation online, Grace said with obvious pride. You sounded like the granddaughter I raised, but also like the leader you've become. The community is stronger because of your courage. I learned from the best teacher, Maya replied. Your lessons about patience and strategy made all the difference. Without that wisdom, I would have fought the wrong battle at the wrong time. Wisdom is meant to be shared, granddaughter. That's how it grows from individual strength into community protection. Maya's return to Denver brought news that Marcus Thornfield had been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction of justice charges. His legal team's attempts to portray him as a victim of political correctness had been demolished by the overwhelming evidence of financial crimes that hurt everyone regardless of race or gender. He'll serve at least 3 years, Ryan Torres reported during their cousin lunch meeting. The judge was particularly harsh about the document falsification and retaliation. She said his behavior represented everything wrong with unchecked corporate power. The scholarship program Maya had established in her grandmother's honor had already funded 6 Native American students pursuing technology degrees at universities across the country. Grace Rivers scholarship recipients received not just financial support but mentorship from Maya and other successful professionals who understood the unique challenges of maintaining cultural identity while excelling in corporate environments. Education was their weapon against us, Grace had told Maya during one of their planning conversations. Now it becomes our weapon for our children's success. Pinnacle Tech Solutions' transformation had attracted industry attention, with other companies requesting consultations on building inclusive workplace cultures. Maya found herself speaking at corporate retreats and leadership conferences, sharing lessons learned from systematic discrimination's defeat. Elena Martinez had been promoted to Chief Human Resources Officer, her expertise in organizational change recognized throughout the technology industry. Her reforms at Pinnacle had become case studies in business schools, demonstrating how proper HR practices could prevent toxic leadership while protecting companies from legal liability. David Chen completed his master's degree in cybersecurity. While working as Maya's deputy, his technical skills enhanced by hard-won understanding of corporate politics. His loyalty during the crisis had been rewarded with increased responsibilities and recognition as one of Denver's rising young professionals. "You taught me that technical excellence without moral courage is just sophisticated cowardice," David told Maya during his performance review. "I'll never again watch someone suffer abuse without finding ways to help." Sarah Kim had launched her own consulting firm specializing in corporate communications during crisis management. Her success built on lessons learned from watching Maya navigate systematic harassment with strategic precision. Her client list included several Fortune 500 companies seeking to address their own toxic culture problems. The most satisfying transformation belonged to Jennifer Walsh, whose courage in preserving evidence had been crucial to Marcus's downfall. She completed her business degree through night school while excelling in her new role, her confidence growing as she discovered what healthy workplace relationships could feel like. "I used to think surviving meant keeping my head down and avoiding trouble," Jennifer reflected during one of Maya's mentorship conversations. "Now I understand that real survival means creating environments where trouble can't take root." Sterling had nominated Maya for the Technology Leadership Excellence Award, recognizing her role not just in technical innovation, but in organizational transformation. The nomination letter emphasized how her patient approach to justice had protected both individual employees and corporate integrity. On a warm evening in late spring, Maya sat on her apartment balcony overlooking the Rocky Mountains, reviewing applications for the latest group of Grace Rivers Scholarship recipients. Each application represented potential that proper support could nurture into leadership that would strengthen future communities. Her phone rang with her grandmother's daily call, their conversations having become a cherished routine that connected Denver's corporate landscape with Oklahoma's tribal wisdom. "How many young people will receive scholarships this year?" Grace asked. 8 students from 6 different tribes. Engineering, computer science, business administration, all fields where we need stronger representation. "Your victory over that man has grown into victory for all our children," Grace observed, with satisfaction. "This is how wisdom works, granddaughter. It starts with one person's courage and spreads until it strengthens the entire community." Maya smiled, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Marcus Thornfield's toxic legacy had been transformed into opportunities for future generations, his attempted destruction converted into tools for building rather than tearing down. The patient hunter had not only survived the storm, but had used its fury to clear space for new growth that would benefit communities far beyond her own experience. Her grandmother's wisdom had proven prophetic. Sometimes the most destructive forces create opportunities for the most constructive change. As darkness settled over Denver's skyline, Maya felt the deep satisfaction that comes from justice achieved through wisdom rather than revenge, from strength demonstrated through patience rather than force. The silent storm had passed, leaving clearer skies for everyone brave enough to demand that truth replace comfortable lies. The cycle was complete, but the influence would continue for generations. 2 years after Marcus Thornfield's downfall, Maya Rivers stood in the lobby of the newly opened Grace Rivers Technology Center, a state-of-the-art facility on the University of Colorado Denver campus that would serve as both classroom and symbol of what patient determination could achieve. Competence over politics. The company had become a model for other organizations seeking to build inclusive cultures that attracted and retained top talent regardless of background. Her grandmother's pendant rested against her collarbone, a daily reminder that individual strength combined with community wisdom could overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. The silent storm that had once threatened to destroy her career had instead become the foundation for transformations that would benefit generations of students, employees, and leaders who would never know her name but would benefit from her courage. The patient hunter had not only survived, but had used her victory to ensure that future predators would find fewer places to hide and fewer victims willing to suffer in silence. Grace Rivers' wisdom lived on through institutions, policies, and people who understood that true strength requires both individual courage and collective action. The legacy would continue long after Maya's own career ended, carried forward by young people who understood that their success meant responsibility to lift others as they climbed toward futures their ancestors could never have imagined but had always fought to make possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.